last few years as I've been building Cheekbone Beauty, that the layers and the depth of the parts of the story that I tell, they get deeper, and I feel it's just truly a privilege to fill this role. Because if I would have thought about this, 5 years is when the idea, or I had a dream about building this business came. But even 6, 8, 10 years ago, I wouldn't even have imagined doing what I'm doing now, which is mind-blowing when I think about it. So I had no experience at all in the cosmetics industry, in the beauty industry whatsoever. And over the last 18 months to 2 years, we have actually made products that will change the world. We started off very small with a lipstick, and we started that way because I thought, after YouTubing how to make a lipstick, that it looked pretty darn easy. It's an oil, a wax, and a pigment. Turns out it's a heck of a lot harder than it looks on YouTube. And that was because we were in search of raw ingredients that were ethically sourced, harvested properly. When the ingredients were, we call what we're doing, and when we're building in our R&D division of Cheekbone Beauty, life cycle thinking. So from the moment of harvest to the end of life of the product is every step of the way we're thinking how this impacts everything that we do for the planet and for people. To the point where even, we think about when you're washing your makeup off your face at the end of the evening, and it's going down the drain from, the cleansers you use and the cosmetics ingredients themselves, how is that impacting waterways and ecosystems? So it's taken a long time. I always say we've just began to scratch the surface and start to build this part of our business, which is really based on a model of sustainability. And sustainability is a word that gets thrown around and used a lot these days. So trying to define what that really meant. And I had a moment a couple months ago, or even last year, where I thought, like, literally, Indigenous people have been doing sustainability for hundreds upon hundreds of years. So we are literally the OGs of sustainability. And so when we started to make and create, we went back to looking at how Indigenous people look at things. So we talk about this in the world of business. Now there's language around it, and it's doing things through the lens of Indigenous people and our communities, and how that impacts the rest of the entire world. And the more research I did on the subject, you learn that Indigenous people have been protecting 80% of the world's biodiversity forever. You see our people, we're the ones that are protecting, whether it's the salmon farming and oceans and pipelines and the Amazon. Like it is Indigenous people that have cared so much about these things that they have literally put their lives on the line to protect it, because they realize that this planet is not going on the way it has been, and it's colonization and basically capitalism and greed that have gotten us to the places where we see it today. And so this brings me to that whole idea then of like economic well-being. What does that really mean? Well, it means that we had to go back, and I know this group of people understand this, that looking at the way systems have been designed are failing us and have failed us. So building billion-dollar companies for the sake of just building billion-dollar companies is not how we're going to solve any of these problems. So when I started the original plan with Cheekbone Beauty, it was about how can I make this lip gloss. That was the original thought. The dream I had was back in 2015, and I'll rewind a little bit even further. So in November of 2014, I got sober after an 8-year hard battle with alcoholism. Shortly, a few months, like 2 months later, it's January of 2015, and I have this most incredible dream. Like it was life-changing. It has been life-changing. I pop out of bed, and I wake up and I literally grabbed my laptop that night, and I remembered in the dream there was just all of these Native little girls. They were covered in lip gloss, and the thing that still sticks with me to this day was their joy and happiness. So everything, you know, that we've been building into Cheekbone Beauty was, how do we create that joy and happiness on Indigenous children and youth faces? And so one of the main questions we ask ourselves as a business every single day about every email that comes our way, every sort of collaboration and opportunity, is how will this impact and enhance the lives of Indigenous youth? So I feel it's so important to be laser focused on the purpose and the reason why your business exists. So having that dream, pop out of bed, grab my laptop and start writing what I now know is the business plan. And then, 2015, 2016, literally read like 100 books on how to build a business, because I had no idea, how to build a beauty business, because I had no idea. And at the same time, when everyone now is introducing themselves and they're talking about who are they, well, and you hear the word, people talk about healing. Well, I've been, and Cheekbone has been this healing journey. So we all know that something like alcoholism, there's all kinds of isms that are really the band-aid of some much deeper issues. So throughout that process of 2015 and 2016, I learned the term generational or transgenerational trauma. My grandparents, both residential school survivors, came out of the school damaged and traumatized from that experience. And so what happened was they went on to have their children, my father being one of the second oldest, and then he has to live under that trauma, and then himself becomes traumatized. So that trauma is then, it's passed on from generation to generation, ultimately passed on to me and my siblings. And so I'm part of this next generation that is really trying to transform and heal, so our children don't have to live with the same trauma that existed. And I firmly believe that because of that kind of trauma, we can turn that trauma into, stories and generations of healing and discovery and power and resilience. And stories I love sharing with Indigenous youth is, I get emotional, but helping them believe and see how much they matter. And if we could do that with lipstick, it was ultimately the goal from the beginning. We live in a country where the organization that we support with 10% of our profits is called the First Nation Child and Family Caring Society. And upon that learning and healing journey of 2015 and 16, I discovered that kids that go to school on reservation get 30 to 50% less funding than kids that go off. And I was blown away by those numbers, because how is that even fair? It's just completely not fair. And what message are we telling our kids if they can see that information like the rest of the world? What message is that telling Indigenous youth? So as a brand, the first layer of what we were trying to do on this journey of sustainability was sustain our communities by empowering our youth through something as simple as representation. We're in a world where you never saw Indigenous faces in any sort of marketing or branding for years upon years since advertising existed, and for us just to build a brand where they could see their faces and relate was just the first step in the direction of the business that we were trying to build. And over the years, the amount of emails and letters and direct messages that we get from kids, from their parents, from adoptive parents. There's an email that I received last year from a mom who adopted a little Indigenous girl in Canada, and the little girl was 10 at the time, and the mom purchased one of our products, and the little girl came home from school and saw just a postcard with 5 of our models on it, and the mom said that she was like bouncing for the rest of the evening. And so and I guess I had no idea at the power of what could happen if you saw your face, and it really all stemmed back from my youth, thinking, what would have happened if I actually saw people that look like me doing amazing things in the world? What would that have meant? And so then we created, adding on more layers. We get pretty deep when we're creating products. So the second step was creating this line called the Warrior Woman Collection. Was just, simple liquid lipsticks, but we purposefully name them after Indigenous women that are doing incredible, amazing things in the world, because for the lack of role models that I had as a youth, and many people that help us on this journey also felt there was a lack of role models for them growing up. So we now have 21 shades, all named after women from across all industries, and not, we were really strategic about just not picking people from like the entertainment or athletes, because I feel like kids always have those kinds of role models. And even though there's less with Indigenous people, but we wanted to choose people like Cindy Blackstock, who is the executive director at the First Nation Child and Family Caring Society, is a PhD social worker that has literally been fighting the Canada in court for the last 15 years and about the rights of First Nations children. And in 2016, the courts decided that yes, Canada does treat First Nations children unfairly. However, no money has come. They're still waiting for all of those parts. And I always say, we're doing this, we do support them with donations, but we know that throwing money at problems will not be the solution. Our goal as a brand and business is to ultimately live that saying, that if you teach a man to fish, he's going to eat for a lifetime, versus just feeding him one meal of fish or something. I always screw up these sayings. My husband laughs at me all the time, but I think you know the story. So we want to make sure, that the education funding gap that exists with Indigenous youth, one, ends, that people know about it. I felt it so important to tell that story to my non-Indigenous world of friends and allies, because as an Indigenous woman looking in the mirror, number one, not learning about residential school till I was 38 years old, and I had no idea. I used to think that my family was just totally screwed up, and I had no idea why. The moment I understood why and read like literal statements from our first Prime Minister, Sir John A. Macdonald, that we were savages, that we had to become white, that he was killing the Indian and the child, the moment I read those, that was freedom and freeing, and fully understanding that now I know what I have to do, because I understand what happened to my grandmother and my father, and that I should no longer live in any sort of shame whatsoever. That actually, obviously, Canada should be ashamed of itself, not me or my family. And that the entire country needs to understand that and stop shaming Indigenous people for how they live or where they live. So those were things that once I realized that, I knew I had to start speaking to this and sharing these stories with people that had no idea. Because if I had no idea and I look like this, then how many more people had no idea what was really happening? And that was the beginning of building this business. And, there's so many ways to build a business, especially in 2020. Like, we could build any kind of businesses we want. The opportunities are endless. But one of the really important directions we wanted to take this was really living these words that, there's within the Indigenous culture, success is not defined by what you have for yourself, the house you have, the car you drive. That means nothing to us. You are successful with what you give back. And that means what you give to your community, what you give back to your family, and what you're giving back to the world. And so that's how we define success. We'll only be satisfied when we know every Indigenous kid on this planet knows how much they matter, and when they see their value and their worth. And as the brand founder and operator, we won't give up until we reach that point. And we want every one of those kids to realize that when they see our brand or any other Indigenous brand, that it's possible for them to create their own economic well-being through making products, through creating new things, through being innovative, and looking to our histories and our past about when we're making things. We as Indigenous people have always mimicked nature, and this is the most my favorite part of trying to build this, because I think about, I was just in my family's home territory in Northwest Angle in Lake of the Woods, like surrounded by the boreal forest, and you're there and then my feet are touching the water and the land, and thinking about my grandmother and then my great grandmother and all of my great grandmothers before them, and how they looked to nature for everything. And nature is perfect. The creator made nature, so there is no flaw in nature. Everything is perfectly recycled. It is mathematically and scientifically magnificent. And Indigenous people always understood that, and they spoke to that, and they thanked the creator every single day for those things. And so that is where we get our inspiration, is just by, with my bare feet on some grass some days, or on some dirt, and winter's coming, so that's going to stop. But as much as possible, just connecting with all of those beautiful things in creation, and thinking about how we as human beings could use the spectacular design to make and create for the future. Thank you.